All right. Well, hi, everyone. And I want to thank you for taking time to come to this particular breakout session so that I can share some of the IRIS resources with you. As was mentioned in the main session, IRIS has a lot of free online resources for use in professional development and for personalized learning. We've been around for 20 years, so we actually have over 1,000 resources. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all of those, but what I do want to do is teach you how to fish, so to speak. I'm going to show you a couple types of resources and then show you how you can go in and identify the ones that work best for you, meet your own individual needs or the needs of your schools, your teachers, your staff, and so on. So if you're looking at your screen right now, or actually you're looking at my screen, we are on the IRIS Center homepage. We're located at Peabody College of Education at Vanderbilt University. So our URL is iris.peabody.vanderbilt.edu. And I'm not going to show you all of the website. Just know that there's a lot here that I encourage you to come and look at your leisure. What I am going to show you is how to find some of our key resources. So I've gone up to the top of the page under this resources link here, and I'm clicking on our IRIS resource locator. This is our internal search engine for the different IRIS resources that you might be interested in. You can sort these resources by topic, which you can see the list of topics down on the side. They're also showing up in the middle at the moment. So things like disability, diversity, evidence-based practices, learning strategies is a big one. Behavior and classroom management is our biggest. You can also search by age groups, resource types, and so on. Some of our modules and resources are also translated into Spanish. So I'm actually going to sort here in the middle. I'm going to click on resource type, and this is going to show you the different types of resources that we have: modules, case studies, fundamental skill sheets, activities, and so on. I'm going to focus on two of them, modules and fundamental skill sheets. We have 73 modules, and if I click on that, it opens up to show you brief descriptions of all the modules that we have. And I'm going to be focusing on accommodations here in a minute. These show up in alphabetical order. Assistive technology is another really great one that we've just updated. Autism spectrum disorder is one of our most popular, although our very most popular are those tied to classroom behavior management. We have part 1, key concepts and foundational practices, a part 2 for elementary teachers, and a part 2 for secondary teachers about developing a comprehensive behavior management plan. Now, when people hear the word module, lots of different things come to mind. So some people think about a set of PowerPoints that they have to use for professional development with a facilitator's guide that goes along with it. Other people think about a video that they watch. So our modules are a little different than that. IRIS modules are self-contained, self-paced units of study on a particular topic. They're interactive and they're based on adult learning theory. So I'm going to walk you through quickly what one of those looks like. And again, as I mentioned, you can come back through and look at the topics and identify resources that would work for your particular school's professional development. So I'm clicking here on Accommodations, instructional and testing supports for students with disabilities. And this takes us to the landing page of our module. So you can get a little bit of an overview, an annotation of what this module covers. Know that the estimated completion time is 2 hours and that there is a professional development certificate available for this module. In order to get that, you would start the module by clicking here, and I'll come back to that in a minute. All of our modules have follow a 5-component cycle. that's, again, based on adult learning theory. And I'm going to walk you through that. But if you want a reminder of how to navigate that cycle, we actually have a little video down here, Navigating an Iris Star Legacy module, that you can always refer back to. The first component of the module is the challenge. I'm going to click on it here. And this is a short video that kind of sets up the information in the module. It gives a case-based scenario, something that happens, a common situation in a classroom or a school. I'm not going to play this particular video for you just because of time, but I will open up, we do have transcripts and transcripts with images, just to show you that, and you can take notes on the side if you want. We have in this particular challenge a first-year teacher who is teaching middle school, and she's got a diverse group of students. One of them has low vision. And as she starts the school year, she realizes that that particular student is not finishing his in-class reading assignments. So she's wondering what kinds of support she can give him to help him out with that. So just again, setting up the scenario that the rest of the information in the module is going to be based on. So to move forward, there's a lot of different ways. We can click the next button here. We can work through the, the Star Legacy. Let me start over. We can start through the Star Legacy cycle, working through the different components here. They're also across the top and down the side. So I'm going to go across the top. At the end of each video, a set of initial thoughts questions comes up. And in this particular video, the questions are, what should teachers know about accommodations for students with disabilities? What types of accommodations are commonly used for students with disabilities? And what are teachers' responsibilities for students with disabilities who use accommodations? So these questions are meant to do several things. The first is to activate the learner's prior knowledge, something we know about in education. It's also helpful if you're leading the professional development, if you have teachers answer these questions as a group, in small groups and partners, even just reflecting on their own, it could help you identify how much they already know, the level of prior knowledge. It can also help you understand any misconceptions they have, preconceptions about the topic at hand, and that can come in very helpful as well. So that's the second component of the Star Legacy cycle. The next component, challenge initial thoughts, perspectives, and resources, and I'll click on the side this time, is the meat of the module. This is where we get the information that the teacher or the learner, in this case, a teacher, would need to know. So these are the objectives for the module and some of the different teacher preparation or accreditation standards that this module aligns with. If we look over here in the left navigation bar, we see that those questions come up again. What should teachers know about accommodations for students with disabilities? First question. And there are module pages that answer that question. Second question, what types of accommodations are commonly used? More module pages. Third question, what are the teacher's responsibilities? And more module pages. So I'm going to go back up to the top. First question, what should teachers know? I'm going to click on that page. So this is where the self-paced learning starts to take place. So for example, in this particular module, what do you need to know about accommodations? We provide some background information on the Every Student Succeeds Act and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, what they say about accommodations. We explain how a disability can create a barrier to learning for the student and the ways that those barriers can manifest in terms of difficulty with it relating to how information can be presented or how the students respond and so on. Those show up later on. And so what is an accommodation? We explain it. We give some examples. For example, the student in the challenge has a visual impairment. So the barrier could be reading printed text and example accommodations. And we do that for several different types of disabilities. We also know that there are some misconceptions about accommodation. So teachers may, in their initial thoughts, have talked about how they think that accommodations lower the expectations for learning, reduce the requirements of the task, and so on. So we address that here. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that accommodations are in some way unfair. They give the student an unfair advantage over their classmates. So we talk about the differences between equality and equity. So giving everybody what they need equally isn't exactly what they need. So supports in this case, equal support still wouldn't help this person who's short reach the shelf, versus giving equitable supports gives everybody what they need to be successful. So just some background knowledge that the learner would need to be able to understand accommodations in more detail. Now, every page throughout the module builds on this. So as much as learners might want to look over here in the left navigation bar and pick out topics that are of interest to them, we really recommend that they start on page 1 and work chronologically through, because we've carefully scaffolded the information as they work through. So going on to page 2, and don't worry, I'm not going to go through all the pages. There are also some practices that are very often confused with accommodations. So modifications is one of those. Modifications, in fact, do change the expectations for learning, and they do reduce the requirements of the task. And modifications are very often used with students with more significant disabilities. So we give some examples of disability categories, barriers created by those disabilities, and possible modifications. And explanations about how modifications and accommodations are different, interviews with experts. We also talk about how people often confuse learning strategies or interventions with accommodations, examples of that. And then we have an interactive activity where we provide the learner with a little example of a student, in this case with a learning disability, who struggles with writing, and 3 things that her teacher does to support her. And then the learner has to determine whether or not each of those things is an accommodation, a modification, or a learning strategy. And if they click on one, they're going to get feedback on whether it's incorrect or correct. Then we actually have a lot more examples: a student with ADHD, a student with a physical disability, muscular dystrophy, and a student with an intellectual disability. So lots of different examples, interactive, give practice with the information that they have just learned. And we continue that all through the module, all the way through to not just identifying the different types of accommodations, but how you select them. We know a lot of times that IEP teams or student support teams may just sort of have a laundry list of accommodations, and they check off things like, oh yes, we'll give the student extended time, or an alternative testing location, and they just kind of go through and check, but they don't necessarily align those with what the student's needs really are. So we explain how to do that. And then we even explain how to evaluate whether those accommodations are working or not, because it doesn't do the student any good to pick an accommodation and then, if it doesn't work, just continue using it. So we explain ways that educators can determine how to measure whether what the student is doing, whether through speed or rate, accuracy, frequency, and so on, how to collect data on the student's current performance, their baseline data. And we give sample recording forms that they can download and use, explain how to collect data during the implementation of the accommodation, and then how to evaluate it. We have a sample graph so that you can see evaluation of the student's baseline data, and then once an accommodation was implemented. We go back and we look at Liam, the student from the original challenge. Remember, he was having difficulty completing his in-class reading. So we look at the number of pages he was able to read baseline before an accommodation was implemented and after. Here's Liam's graph, pre-accommodation and post. So it looks like his accommodation is working. And then we actually give an interactive activity with a new student, Roberto. We look at his data. We can enter in average time, check it, and then actually graph his baseline data, interactive. And we can go ahead and graph it all the way through. If I graph it incorrectly, it tells me to try again. And then once we look at all his data, we can determine whether the accommodation is effective or not and get feedback on that. So again, that's the third component of the module, perspectives and resources, really taking the learner in depth through what an accommodation is, how to select it, how to implement it, how to evaluate it. So sometimes people think they get through that and they are done with the module, but they're not. There are two more components. One is the wrap-up, which is a summary of the module. And the final component is an assessment. And the assessment can be used in a variety of ways. College professors who also use these in pre-service preparation might assign this as homework, as proof that their students did the assignment. In professional development, sometimes these are used where educators can work together in small groups and answer the questions. Sometimes, they're just given as something where educators can write out answers and give them back as proof of learning. So we have different questions. We've got a video that then is used of a student using some assistive technology as an accommodation. We've got a few student examples. And analyzing data and graphing it to determine whether this particular accommodation was effective. So those are the 5 components of the module. Taking it to the next, to the end of the module, I'll come back to the PD hours. There are related resources, other modules on things like assistive technology, differentiated instruction, universal design for learning, things that can go broader or deeper into this content, wraparound content maps, where you can, again, find additional resources that might be helpful for professional development or personalized learning. So I do want to come back. I'm going to go back to the modules landing page. I said I'd revisit this professional development certificate. So all of our not all of our modules, but half of our modules, the most commonly used ones, do have professional development certificates that can be earned. So instead of going through the module that way, you would click on this and it takes you through a different route to earn the certificate. It's kind of like online shopping. The educators would need to set up an IRIS account and then add the module to their cart. The good thing about this is that there is no fee associated with it. We used to charge for these. We stopped a little while ago temporarily, and thanks to a wonderful, generous donation from the Wax Family Foundation, we can keep these free throughout the end of 2022 at least. So when you go this route for the professional development certificate, the learner takes a pre-test, works through the module, takes a post-test, and then earns the certificate. School leaders can ask that the educators put their pre-test and post-test scores on their certificate. That can be automatically added. So you can look at growth of learning across the module, or they can just ask for the post-test score to show mastery. Learners have 3 opportunities to take post-test. So if they don't like their first post-test score, they can take a different version and yet a different version. And then the certificate automatically records the highest score. We actually have some interesting examples. I'm now clicking on this to go back to our homepage, scrolling down, hoping I'm not making you dizzy while I do this. Examples of how people have used the IRIS resources in different ways. In this story, Iris in Kentucky talks about how an educational co-op used one of the IRIS resource PD certificates on high quality IEPs for over 1,200 educators. And they did require a certain post-test score on that module in order to then advance to the next level of professional development training that the district was providing. So it's an interesting story if you're interested in that. All right, now I'm scrolling up. Close your eyes because I'm going to make you dizzy a little bit. Scrolling back up to the top, hitting the resource button again, hitting the Iris Resource Locator. Going back to this that we looked at initially, remember I told you I was going to show you 2 different types of resources. The first was our modules. The other one I'm going to show you really quickly is our fundamental skill sheets. These are short, quick primers on teacher skills on things like behavior-specific praise, choice making, high probability requests, proximity control. So these are short, sweet 2-pagers. We just give you a quick example definition. What is proximity control? This particular one. What do we know about it? Where we summarize the research, give you the procedures step by step, tips for implementation and things to keep in mind. And then we actually have implementation examples, in many cases elementary and high school, where you can watch a video and you can see both examples and non-examples. So you can see the teacher implementing it step by step with guides. And then also if she skips or makes a mistake in one of the steps, so it lacks fidelity, just how the results of that. And they're not great big huge missteps, they're small ones, but they definitely affect how well implemented and the effectiveness of that. And we even have a few, one in particular that's on virtual learning. So virtual behavior specific praise with examples and non-examples. And we have another virtual fundamental skill sheet coming out soon on pre-correction. So again, just wanted to show you those things very quickly, let you know that we have so many resources available for professional development, personalized learning, and just really encourage you to come to the site, take a look at for yourself and see what we've got available. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I can take any questions that come up.